In this video, I'm going to contrast US immigration enforcement with UK immigration enforcement, Scotland in particular. Now in America, we see ICE very much associated with Trump. They're enforcing the law. Every nation on the globe has immigration controls, so they need to be enforced one way or another. Now, do you need agents looking like members of the SAS armed with firearms? Well, maybe in America you do need that to a degree, so people might be quite desperate when they think their place in America is endangered. They might try and flee. In America, a lot of people are armed. There might be some sort of mass organised resistance as well. So do they need to be quite forceful? Possibly. Does what's happening seem a bit over the top? Probably. But the woman who was shot very recently, I mean, she was trying to drive at the officer. You can see her wheel spinning on the ice while she's pointed at the officer. So the officer might have panicked. I think if someone's trying to drive a vehicle at you and you panic, I'd have thought the first reaction would be you jump out of the way rather than shooting the driver. But basically, it's hard to say exactly what happened there. We haven't got the full information. In general, I'd say my sympathy tends to be limited for people who are resisting arrest and attacking law enforcement officers. Anyway, let's leave Minnesota and go to Glasgow at the other end of the spectrum. You remember back in 2022, two Sikh men who were in the UK illegally were approached, well, basically detained by the border force, the immigration authorities in Britain. And the van parked in the street, it got these two Sikh men, and they were detained in the van, but then a crowd gathered around the van and just sat down and just refused to move. So the van had got these two people who were here illegally in it, but there's a big crowd not letting the van drive away. So 8 hours later, Police Scotland asked the Immigration Enforcement Agency to basically give up and release the people and just go away. Police Scotland said that was necessary for the well-being of the protesters, to protect the well-being of the protesters. So the men were just released, escorted to a nearby mosque, with crowds following them, and then they were allowed to go. So basically the government agency just gave up, and mob rule won, and the law wasn't enforced, and that was the upshot there. What was the response from politicians in Scotland? Well, a few said, this raid occurred on Eid in a community with many Muslim residents. How outrageous is that? Nicola Sturgeon said this is staggeringly irresponsible in an area experiencing a COVID outbreak. Anna Sawa said it's particularly unacceptable that this is happening during a pandemic in an area that has a spike in cases and on the day of Eid. Right, the pandemic. Well, surely the people to be condemned in the pandemic is the crowd gathering. But we all remember in the pandemic there was the right sort of crowds and the wrong sort of crowds. The wrong sort of crowd is like going to a relative's funeral. That was, deadly irresponsible. But gathering for some sort of left-wing protest in the street, that was sort of okay, COVID-wise. Then it'd been Eid. The men were Sikhs. But who cares in any case? Do we not arrest Christians on Christmas Day or Irish people on St. Patrick's Day? That's just total and utter nonsense. But these Scottish politicians, you'll often hear them, we uphold the rule of law. The rule of law is very fundamental for us when it suits them. When they don't like the law or they think there's political capital in taking the other side to the lawful authorities, then it seems some are quite happy to do it. At this time, Howard Beckett, the Assistant General Secretary of the union Unite, tweeted that the Home Secretary Priti Patel should be deported instead. So these two men who were here illegally, what happened to them? I'm pretty confident in saying they're still here. So basically this crowd gathering, trying to take the law into their own hands, they got their own way, and these two men, as far as I'm aware, are still living in Scotland. If they had been deported, surely we would have heard about it big time. But I'm pretty confident in saying they have not been. That is pretty weak, isn't it? And it sets a dangerous precedent for the future. That if a mob rises up and opposes immigration enforcement, then, well, fine, it works. You stop it. Now, bringing this right up to date, which is why I made this video, this is what prompted me, is a new documentary film that's just been launched here in January 2026 about the Kenmure Street incident where the van was stopped taking the people here illegally away. And this documentary will obviously glorify the crowd interfering with the proper enforcement of the law. It will be celebrating the victory of mob rule over immigration control. Now, who do you think paid for this documentary film? I mean, you know who paid, don't you? I mean, it's obvious. You guessed it as soon as I said it. You paid for it. The taxpayer paid for it. They were given £61,000 from Screen Scotland. Screen Scotland gets its funding from various other government agencies in Scotland. So the government is funding a film that's basically funding, that's celebrating the criminal act of interfering with law enforcement and justifying, yes, a mob rule over the rule of law. Now, what will be the result of this documentary? People who watch it, people who hear about it, they will feel emboldened to themselves resist immigration law enforcement. So in the future, when people have been removed from the country because they shouldn't be here, or they came promising they'd leave on a certain date and they didn't, so they're breaking the law, people here illegally, when the action's taken to remove them, people who've seen this film will feel, well, I can take the law into my own hands and I can take direct action and stop this. So in the future, will one of these incidents turn violent? Very possibly. When it does, which side of the SNP and Labour and Lib Dems and Greens, which side are they on? Well, the indication is they're probably going to be on the side of the protesters. And when things do turn violent in the future, who knows what it will lead to? Injuries, deaths, maybe to protesters, maybe to police and immigration officers. Who knows how this will unfold? But if that does happen, some of the blame lies with the Scottish government for stoking up this sort of sentiment. So immigration enforcement in the USA, is it excessive? Well, it looks like it could well be. I don't really follow it closely, but it looks like it is a bit over the top. But here, weak and feeble in the extreme. Surely there's a happy medium somewhere in between.